Welcome to Alex Nanny, the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. I'm Alex.
And I'm Annie.
And we are joined today for the third time. This is a three-peat for Marcus Rader, who is the CEO of Hostaway and our new sponsor of the podcast. We're so excited to see you today, Marcus.
Thank you very much for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here and lovely to see you again.
We're really excited to talk to you. And I think, again, I always say this, but people know who you are. But maybe just a refresher for some of our newer listeners who Marcus Rader is and who Hostaway is.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Marcus. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Hostaway. This year, actually, we became the largest all-in-one solution for vacation rental property managers. So we produce vacation rental software. We just happen to be bigger than anyone else on the planet doing that. And that's pretty amazing, considering we started only 9 years ago. So we have had a tremendous growth spurt here, but we're not done yet. We're going to continue growing. And we're going to reshape the landscape and hopefully improve the industry a lot.
Wow. And how many properties on Hostaway now?
We can't say it publicly. What I can say is that anyone in this space who mentions that number outside of a publicly listed company, so if Airbnb mentions it, that's probably true, but everyone else, if they give a number, they'll give a false number. But we have some pretty, let's say, powerful access to these type of metrics from our competition, so we know.
Very good. Cryptic, but I like it.
Yeah.
The problem with being in this position is I spend most of my days signing NDAs about what I can and cannot say anywhere, and this is public, so I can't honestly remember all the NDAs that I have signed. But yeah, that's just what it is when you grow, I guess.
Yeah. What a journey you've had since the first time we had you on the show was it was 2 years ago about this time. And my gosh, so much has happened, not only with Hostaway, but just in the industry, since that point. And I guess maybe just to start, what are your thoughts now that we're in the midpoint through 2024? What are your clients hearing? Like, what are the pain points? What are the main things that the feedback is coming back to your team?
I'd say the number one is regulation. It's hitting a lot of places, not the obvious places, but a small town somewhere where short-term rentals was never a problem. Now suddenly they need to figure something out. That's something that's going on. Also on a bigger level in Europe, they are looking more at country level and even EU level legislation to figure these things out. And that's going to be a short-term pain. It's quite fascinating. I'm staying in an illegal short-term rental in New York now, in a dedicated rental building that someone is subletting illegally to me for the week. And what I learned here this week is that before Airbnb, it was a massive market, a gray market in New York. Before it was illegal. Essentially, New York is a fascinating place because a lot of people go through here. They might move to the country and then go somewhere else. They might be, let's say, musicians on a tour and they stop in New York and then they move on. And at the same time, there's a lot of business, a lot of wealth, and a lot of connections in this city. Now, the people that come here and make it, they obviously want to be more private and selective. So a lot of the buildings here are condos. A lot of them are co-ops where you have to apply to even buy a unit. You can't just use money and get a place. No, you have to prove that you're the right kind of person to fit in. So a lot of this has been regulated for decades on a very local level, on a building level. But still, there has been a massive gray market, or should I call it black market, where these units are rented out. I just met a local friend and he said, the way rents are going, nobody can afford to leave their home.
Yeah.
Because if you're leaving your home for a week, you can't afford that. You have to rent it out. It's not possible. It's like a prison if you can't rent it out. So,
Yeah.
and the new regulations here where they're essentially saying, hey, you want to keep doing your black market, your gray market stuff? That's okay. But Airbnb and Vrbo, you're the bad guys. You make it visible. We need more Craigslist. We need like nondescript, no photos. That's okay. And then a lot of fraud. A lot of people are going to give money and not get a place in return. New York City is saying that's okay. That's all okay. And that's always been okay. But then doing it above the ground where it's visible, bringing in tax dollars, that's not okay. That's, to me, is insanity. It's just
crazy. Yeah, totally crazy. How did you book that property?
Originally, I booked it on Airbnb. Then the listing got shut down and it got canceled. The host, should I call him, reached out to me and said, yo, just send me the money.
I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
So Marcus and I were just at the Skift Short-Term Rental Summit Forum, I think Forum is what they called it this week, and they had a session on regulatory, and they had Matt Curtis, who speaks a lot at VRMA, and then the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, and they talked about some of this, what Marcus is referring to. I believe it was somebody that used to work for Verbo had rented a vacation rental, and it was one of those ones that was like black market, like didn't know it, and they were in the unit, and then the regulatory folks came out and knocked on the door and said, "You got to go." Like he had his whole family in a unit and they were kicked out because they were caught. And so there's a lot of this. So hopefully, Marcus, that won't happen to you. You won't get caught.
Yeah.
But
If we have to cut this recording short,
yeah.
we'll know why.
Don't answer the door. Don't answer the door. But Marcus brought up a really good point about it. Is I think that obviously regulatory is it's getting into the crevices of like all these communities. But one of the things that they were talking about was there's all this data that shows why some of the regulations just don't make sense. Like New York is a great example. So they're losing tourism dollars to tax base to New Jersey. So all these people are spending their money going into New Jersey and staying there. But then they have people that are just deciding, you know what, I'll go to Chicago or,
Mhm.
Boston and not go to New York. So New York is like the businesses are going to be suffering from that. But the greater thing is like ultimately boils down to is like there's a lot of emotion behind it. And so Marcus made a comment before we started recording about like, the psychology of it. And so it would be really interesting, like moving forward into VRMA, like what the psychologist would recommend, like how you approach these communities, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of these people that are just making these decisions based on like this visceral gut reaction to what they think is happening, and they don't really know what's happening. Even though the facts are telling them one way, they're believing another because their gut's telling them something different. So it's such an interesting topic, and Skift did a really good job touching on it. But off the Skift thing, Marcus, I was asking you, like, what were your other big takeaways from the event? Because it was a jam-packed agenda. They started at 9 in the morning and they ran till 5 o'clock, and it was just 20-minute sessions all day long, but some really, really phenomenal speakers.
Yeah, I think the most interesting session was definitely the one with the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, and Matt Curtis, founder of Smart City, about regulations and how these decisions often get made based on feelings rather than facts. I really like the example where the politicians in a small town, I don't remember which one, but they had promised that they're going to have 3 full-time enforcement officers because of all the problems. Because the reason why they regulated it was all the problems. Now, what they found out was that they didn't have enough work for those 3 staff, because turns out once they started systematically measuring the problems, there were no problems to be found. So they had on average 1 complaint per week, but the nature of the complaints was exactly the opposite of what it was supposed to be. And it wasn't a single family home with 25 college kids partying all night. That wasn't the problem. No, the problem was that someone had forgot to take in the garbage can.
Yeah, it was a trash issue. I remember that.
Or there was one complaint about too many cars parked on a public road where you're allowed to park. That has nothing to do with short-term rentals, but you don't need 3 full-time staff. So when you start looking at the actual facts and numbers behind these decisions, you realize very quickly that no, it's a lot based on feelings, and that's very different from what I've been thinking before. Also, one thing that's becoming more and more evident is that you simply can't scale a vacation rental business to massive numbers. It's incredibly hard to maintain the quality, and actually a large part of the market will continue to be small, owner operated for the foreseeable future.
That's interesting. So, was that a topic of conversation about scaling at the conference?
Not so much. Not so much. It was, I think, anyone who looks at the stock price of Sonder or Evolve or Vacasa, they
Yeah.
stay very clear of that subject. But taking back a few years, I mean, everyone said this is a big industry that's gonna consolidate and everything's gonna be big and it's gonna be good and standardized. And we're still not seeing that today. We're still not seeing it. I'm getting better service here than from this illegal guy. Yeah, he's doing a great job. I mean, he wants me to just stay here and then leave, and anything I need, it's right here. Like this is amazing.
And the stat that was shared was that 95% of the pie that you and I talk about, Alex, we used to say 25, 75, 95% of that pie is operators 5 units or under. So,
95. Wow.
95. Yeah, it was, and so it was very astounding. But one of the last sessions they did was with Philip Kennard from Future Stay, and he talked about having that segment be represented. And so, there's no seat at the table at Verma for them. So what they're
Yeah.
doing is they're building their own table over at some of these other conferences, which is what we talk about. How do we reach them? We may have
Mhm.
already hit a tipping point with Verma where we can't reach them, but how do we get more involved and make sure that those people under 5 units or even under 10 units are getting access to information? And that's what Philip and I had some side conversations about. And I think my question for you, Marcus, is obviously that's a growth opportunity for you, even being the largest, that there's still opportunity out there for you to grow. What do you see is your ability to tap into that and both ensure that they're doing all the right things, but that if they need help and they need education, like that they can get it? Do you think that that's something that Hostaway can help foster within their community, is the education and the ability to professionalize and standardize, within their side of the business that we on the larger professional side are always asking for? Do you think you guys can do that?
Absolutely, and we're constantly doing it. We have marketing webinars monthly, but what we also have for our customer base is more practical, down to earth webinars to our user base. And what I found out recently is that those are way more popular. There's a huge amount of property managers tuning in every week to our user webinars. Speaking of Philip, if you're listening, thanks a lot for the whiskey shots. I had a pretty terrible hangover the next. So I decided to have a steak sandwich, and then I went for a 13-mile run. I ran the entire south end of Manhattan in a circle. So
Did you have the whiskey before or after?
the night before, yes.
Oh, the night before, okay.
Thanks, Philip, for the whiskey. That was very, very kind of you. So we're actually organizing our first user conference this year. It's called Hostchella. It's going to be in Miami in November. We tried to choose a date that's not the highest obvious season when everything will be packed, but also when it starts getting cold in some places of the world. We have almost sold out of tickets. The demand has been massive, and we have a good package of sponsors, including some well-known brands like Airbnb and Verbo, but also partners from a marketplace. The events industry in this space has somewhat had an implosion this year. It's been fascinating to see. I'm still waiting to see when we can get it at a table and talk to VRMA and see what do we do about this, because it's just not working. The events that are being organized, they don't reach the right audience. They don't reach the mid-size and the smaller property managers or owner operators, and that's a challenge. That's a challenge, because if the industry isn't going in a direction where only a couple of big ones will survive, but it's rather the opposite, that this is a local service, and the more local you are, the better service you can give. Well, in that case, we need a new format. So we're trying to do our best, and that's why we're organizing this event in November.
I had a conversation with somebody about this the other day, that it's almost like the vendor hall concept needs to be completely overhauled. Creatively thinking, like, what are ways that vendors can engage with the property managers at these events, would get hopefully more and different people too. But there has to be more meaningful conversations, whether that's the more of the round tables or more of like the smaller group formats. Because I was talking to another company earlier this morning, you get so many property management companies that they're going to these shows, or even not at the shows, they're buying so many different pieces of tech that overlap and do the same things, and they don't know that as they're doing it. And it's like everybody's hungry for information, and I think a lot of companies, they do listen to these podcasts, and some go to the conferences, but there's a huge amount of people that don't go to the events. But there's nobody that's really giving them a high level guidance on, like, this is a good decision, this isn't, you don't need to do this. And I think just the way that the vendor hall has been set up, it's not conducive to having the best conversations with the people that are there, that you're educating them, you're talking about what it is that you offer, but doing it in a way that it's truly going to benefit their business and make those connections. And the number one thing that we saw on one of the Verma surveys was the number one reason that people go to these events is the networking. So how can that be reinvented in a way that it really fosters those conversations and relationships to be built?
Yeah, you're touching on a really important topic. One of the most fascinating aspects that I've learned running a tech company for the last 9 years is that human nature is to set up obstacles. And it's much easier for you to achieve something if you have an obstacle. I'm sure you heard someone say, "Oh, I would exercise except I have this old injury," or "I wish I could go on a diet, but I'm restricted to this or that, so I can't do it." It's great to have an excuse. And today, let's say for an average employee, if you need an excuse, which is, once again, I'm not saying that it's in any way lazy or wrong. It's just human nature is that if something is easy and it's right there, then our brain reacts to it as if something's wrong. Typical example is $100 bill is lying on the street. Very few people are going to pick it up, even if they see it, because they think, okay, it must be fake. But then if you have an obstacle in between and technology can be that obstacle, then it's so much easier. So you can say, I could do my job, except I don't have the right tools. So I need to find a new tool. And then you end up often choosing the tool that's the hardest to implement. So, I could go running, but I need these special shoes where the delivery time is 6 weeks, rather than, well, actually, you're wearing shoes right now. You could run in those. It will have the same impact. But that's the thing. But, well, it's funny how these events, because they're very much related to the tech landscape, because such a huge part of the budget for these events is paid by the tech companies. And for the last 10 years, there has been a massive inflow of capital to these tech companies. Now, with higher interest rates, it's getting very, very difficult to get any funding at all. And as a result of it, all these companies are forced to start looking at their budgets when there's not unlimited capital anymore. And unfortunately for the event organizers, it seems that the events are not producing the ROI that they need.
Yeah.
So this is why we're seeing so much talk about the events this year. It's essentially that the free money it was here for 10 years, 15 years. Now it's no longer here. Now we actually need to produce value to get any dollar whatsoever. And that can be a big shock for especially bigger organizations like VRMA.
We'll be back in just a minute after a word from our premier brand sponsor, Hostaway. Buying a new property management system can be a daunting task. We get it. Researching, implementing, and onboarding new software can be time intensive and costly. And there's always that lingering fear that the product might not deliver on its promises. But for short term property managers, there's a game changer in the industry.
That's right. Hostaway is the fastest growing and top rated property management system for short term rental property managers. And for good reason.
Hostaway doesn't just streamline your operations, it makes you more money. Thousands of Hostaway users have quickly realized their return on investment with profitability boosting features like
increased bookings through multi-channel distribution, cutting out commission by driving guests to your own direct booking website, and increased revenue per reservation through offering tasteful upsells.
Plus, with connections to industry-leading dynamic pricing products like Price Labs, you can increase bookings and your ADR without worrying that you're leaving money on the table or pricing yourself out of the market.
Listeners of Alex and Annie podcast can onboard Hostaway for only $100. That's $400 off the regular onboarding fee. Visit get.hostaway.com/Alex and Annie for a demo and to learn more.
Ready to go pro? Learn why thousands of property managers are using Hostaway to take their vacational business to the next level.
Visit get.hostaway.com/Alex and Annie and get started today.
I've heard some vendors say that, I just want to get your thoughts on this, but that they would be willing to pay for all the property managers to go to a show if the cost for property managers was essentially free or very, very low cost. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that sounds great. Absolutely a good idea. The prices for the tickets should overall be a bit lower, but then I'm not in the events business other than our own event, and that one we're going to be running at a loss, I hope, because it's an investment that we want to make in the community. Yeah, I don't know if the economics work. That's the thing. I'm not an expert on the events.
If no more property managers came, I'm sure all the vendors would be really mad at that point.
Well, that's what has been happening now in a lot of events. People are not coming. And one challenge with the cheaper ticket prices, there was one trade show where I went where the organizers straight out said that, okay, we sold this many tickets. Here's how many people showed up. So I asked, what was the price of the ticket? Like early bird prices were 59 and then 159. Well, maybe that's why they didn't show up. They bought the ticket, but then they figured out that the schedule, the travel, the time, the hotel, restaurants, that adds up way more. It could be that if you sell cheap tickets or a free event, nobody shows up.
I've talked to some people lately about the idea of doing more regionally focused events, and partially because of exactly that, the travel component is really hard. So, whenever the events are done on the East Coast, a lot of times the West Coast and like Hawaii, they can't come because it's just too cost prohibitive and it's just too many time zones away. And same thing for East Coast going, further to the West. So would you see a scenario where, again, if we just use VRMA as an example, that they do like VRMA East West, or, North South East West, like something along those lines? Do you see a scenario where that would be of benefit? I feel like it would be, because it would be easier to get people to it. But what are your thoughts on that?
Potentially, but I mean, they have their spring forum that is in different locations, but it's not that successful. And even VRMA International, first of all, it's not international because there's nobody from outside of the US there, except maybe me as a Canadian. It doesn't address the real problem of the underlying economics there, and also the content.
The content, I was going to say, that would be the
Yeah.
other thing. Yeah.
Content needs to be relevant. I mean, if we have thousands of people tuning in on how to find out how to optimize one little aspect of the business, thousands of property managers tune into a webinar on that. How come you go to a presentation at Verma and there's 25 people in the audience? That part I don't understand at all.
Well, I love what you guys said about Skiff. Every session was 20 minutes. I think that would be a phenomenal thing to try, because it's hard when everybody's in different rooms. And I was just at the VRMA Executive Summit, and one of the things that and I think everybody else there really enjoyed about it was that we were all in one room for the sessions and there weren't multiple. I mean, it was a smaller list of content that was up there, but doing smaller sessions, shorter sessions, not longer duration, that you can get more people speaking. But sitting for an hour and a half in a presentation is too long in my opinion.
Totally. They did a really good job of, again, making it relevant, but they put it in these bites of time where it wasn't too much information. But I think, to the point, one of the things that I know, Alex, you and I have talked about, and Marcus, I think you're on the same track we are, is that, if you want to have people from all aspects of the industry, from small to large, you have to have different tracks. And I know this has come up for years at Verma, and I don't know why we can't seem to get there, is like having an entry level track. Like, here's how you start the business. Here's how you grow your business. And here's what you do when you're already grown. And I think the problem is we've got all the already growns trying to tell everybody else how to do it. And maybe they don't have the same vision. So they go one time and they hear it and they're like not aligned with that thought process. So they're out there searching for somebody that will align with their thought process. And it's really just more about, what are the basics that people need? And so I feel like we're at a tipping point now. Like, something has to give. And so, Marcus, what you're trying to do with your event, I think, is great. You're going to be inclusive of the industry as a whole. Like, you're going to provide all of that knowledge that doesn't matter how large or small you are, people will be able to access it. And you're already doing it, it sounds like, from your webinar. So everybody could learn from that and we could replicate whatever you're doing. So we'll go to your event and watch it and see how good it is. So
Hostchella already sounds like a lot of fun. So
I know.
you did a good job bringing the fun to it. And I think that's an
Yeah.
important part too,
Yeah, I'm trying to arrange some offsite sessions as well, including beach yoga and early morning sunrise run with led by me personally. But you're right, there needs to be some basics, because even us as a business, we took in an investor last year, PSG. They run some of the best software companies on the planet. Sometimes they ask really basic questions, and it's things that we have spent, maybe I spent 6 years of my life answering that question, but I haven't looked at it in the last 3 months, and suddenly I don't know the answer anymore. And I can give a perfect example of this. I finally got my home in Bonita Springs in Southwest Florida. It just needed furniture. And I'm using a property manager there. And the owner said, my wife is great interior designer. And I thought, okay, let's have her do her thing. So she went in and put in furniture and then got the photos. When I got the photos, I realized that they'd done it all wrong. Because when you compare in the area, you see every single pool will have a giant inflatable flamingo. And our pool doesn't have that. Something that was mentioned at a session in Skiff, people want fire pits. Yeah, no kidding. We have a fire pit, but there's no photo with what do I call it? Adirondack chairs. In
Yeah.
Canada, we call them Goka chairs. And then those cheap string lights from Costco. Like every other property that has a fire pit has a picture like that. Why is ours missing? And then there should be the secret closet filled with toys and maybe a big bear or something for the kids. Where's that picture? And it's missing. We're not going to get any bookings on that property because we don't have the pink flamingo in the pool. And it's so obvious when you go and look. You look at the 10 most popular properties, every single one has a flamingo. Why don't we have a flamingo? But that's just what happens. This property manager was very passionate when they got started, but then everything got complex and there was, yeah, a lot of things to do. And then they think they're doing a good job, but they can't even get the basics right. Like, just look at the competition. If everyone has a
Yeah.
pink flamingo, just put a pink flamingo there. It's 39.95 at Walmart. It's not so hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
But this is the kind of education you need. It's not only beginners that need that, it's also the property managers that have grown, because the very basics of the business can very easily be forgotten when things get complex, and they do get complex as you
yeah.
grow.
I think that was one of the things that was in some of the sessions was kind of apparent is like people think they know what's going on, but they're not like getting back in touch with the business enough to really understand what is it that the consumer is looking for. Your people are spending so much money trying to change consumer behavior, and consumer behavior is really expensive to change. Should just go to the consumer and look what they want and deliver that to them and quit trying to tell them. It's that old adage of like, let the market be what it's going to be. Don't try to tell it what it should be. And so I think that there's too many people trying to tell the consumer how they should behave and not listening to or looking at what their actual actions are.
Yeah, but also the type of sessions I find them quite often way too generic and unpractical. I mean, for example, if you open up and show data about the US market and as a regional markets and bookings and lead time, so you list what the OTAs like to do, they list the popular amenities. And then they say you should be lakefront. Well, if you manage 20 homes and 5 of them are lakefront, you can't just take the other 15 and move them lakefront. Like, that's not
Right.
really actionable insight. What is
Yeah.
actionable insight is, okay, you got 5 lakefront homes. Here's how to do it the right way, and here's how to do it the wrong way. For example, when you take a picture of the living room and it's looking over the lake, take an HDR photo. Take 3 different photos with different settings so that you can see both the inside, not dark, and the outside. And that's an actionable insight, but I never see that in the sessions, and it's quite upsetting to me, honestly, how little information you're getting. Because if someone says, "Oh, the booking lead time has gone from 30 days to 60 days," what does that really mean for your business?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What are the implications? Is it like, if your business is doing well, are you supposed to feel better that, okay, now everyone else is doing bad, but I'm doing well? Or if your business is doing badly, are you supposed to say, oh, well, this sucks, but everyone else sucks too? What's the value in that? There's absolutely no value whatsoever.
And I think that's the takeaway that most companies have when they go to events. It's like, or that's like, that is a successful conference if you go and you feel like we're doing better than everybody. We know all this stuff, And I think maybe part of that mentality is what's gotten us to where we are. You shouldn't walk away thinking that you just know more than everybody else. I mean, chances are the other people there know things that you don't know, but it's got to be more of an open format to get that information out there. And to your point, more actionable things that can be taken home and executed on. I had one question, Marcus. You had said earlier that scale is not possible, and I think you meant more on like the Vacasa, the very very large size scale. But from your clients and just kind of your perspective on the industry, do you think scale is still possible, and are you seeing it on companies that are going from 300 to 600, or if they're going from one market and adding another market? I think there's a lot of really ambitious companies in this space right now that's what they are going for, but some unfortunately find that it's a lot more difficult than what they had originally planned. But what do you think on that side of scale, either within a market growing a lot of inventory or going into multiple markets?
I definitely have changed my view over the years. And I haven't actually looked at the metrics for our customer base. I know some are growing really well, but I've been doing some extensive traveling over the last, actually, this year I booked 225 travel days, but it seems like it's going to be a bit more. And I think I stayed one night in a hotel so far out of
Wow.
around 110 days I've been traveling now this year. You need to get down to the basics, and it's just very hard to deliver that quality and that passion that you can unless you really know how to scale a business. The number of properties that you manage isn't really relevant. What's more relevant is whether the business is making a profit, whether it's working in a way that if you go away for a week, the business will still run. And that's something that a lot of property managers are missing. They're looking at a spreadsheet and they're looking at the number of properties, but if they don't deliver the good guest experiences over those, and that can be very hard to do if you're in multiple locations, then
Mhm.
you're going to run into problems. And yeah, you don't even know where to look. You should be looking yourself in the mirror, but that's quite often not what people want to do. Again, human nature works in certain ways, and you always try to find something else to blame than yourself. That's what I think is the biggest hurdle for scaling, is getting your own organization in shape, getting the right
Yeah.
leadership in place, getting the right people, and understanding that, if I mean, pretty much everyone in this space is a founder when they start their property management company, but
Mhm.
they have to understand that founders have superpowers. You can't hire a founder. So if you expect to scale your business, you just need to accept that whatever you're doing, you can hire someone, but the efficiency, the output, it's going to be, best case, it's going to be half of whatever you're
Mhm.
doing. So if your expectations are that you can hire people like yourself, well, sorry, you can't. They're working for themselves. That's just the way it goes. So yeah, there's a lot of dimensions to the scaling aspect of the business.
So speaking of scaling, if somebody wants to scale, and you've obviously scaled, we talked about this, largest company on the planet in our space, that means that you have to obviously iterate and add technologies and add features to your platform. So what do you have in the works, or what do you want to share with people that you guys are working on for users of your platform?
So we just launched Hostaway Capital. That was actually really successful because it gives property managers access to capital based on the data that's already in the system. So normally, let's say you want a business loan for marketing, or maybe you want to furnish another rental or hire one more staff. That's expensive too. You'd have to do a lot of due diligence, but because our system already knows business, you can get a loan decision in 24 hours. And we have been really surprised over how many people take advantage of that, because when we have the data and we're basically a third party verifying that you are who you are, you can get a lot lower interest rates. So that's been a really successful launch. There's a lot of additional products that we are going to be launching this year, and some of our competitors already offer them, but they are usually tools or services that property managers use on a daily or weekly basis, and it's just been outside the platform through our marketplace. And now we're going to be offering the inside the software as well, which makes it easier, for example, to scale, to train your staff. That, hey, you can do this within Hostaway. So there's a quite a big roadmap of additional functionality coming out this year.
That's really cool on the capital side. I think you're the only ones doing that I know of. That's a unique value proposition, and what a way to show that you're a partner in your client's success by offering that.
Yeah, it's quite a unique concept. We got the idea from the e-commerce space. You know, Shopify is quite a big thing, and their headquarters are about a 5-minute walk from where I live. And yeah, they've been doing exactly that, partnering up with financial institutions, because they got all the data. They know how much you're selling, they know how much your cost basis is, and they know, you know, whether you're growing or not, and they can do projections. So they have been doing this for years and helping the successful ones who just need access to more capital get it easier. That was the main driver and motivation behind it.
Such a smart thing to add. So, question on like taking marketplace and bringing it in. One thing that we have heard a little bit of rumblings as of late is there are some organizations that have all the pieces. They have the channel management, and they have the PMS, and then they have the credit card services, and they have all this. And what they have done is started to force users to only use the tools that they have, and not allowing them to tack on the ones that they already may be comfortable with and really, really like when they came to you, or some at some point added them in. What is your thought on kind of the larger ecosystem of all the technology and allowing people to use the tools that they're comfortable with, as opposed to forcing them? Is there kind of a middle of the road approach that you're taking, in that you've got the services that you want them to use a specific amount of your services, or is it still a situation where they can just pick and choose what they want as they grow?
We have, as far as I know, the largest marketplace. We have over 200 integrated software partners, and we sincerely, if any of you are listening, we sincerely recommend you to our users. And it's very simple, because if you do something that's very unique, like let's say a guidebook, you're probably the best company in the world doing that, and we should be recommending the best solutions to our customers. But something we mentioned here earlier is that a lot of people want to use technology for the sake of using technology, because they want to create an obstacle in order to get to their goal. And as such, they take a technology into use and they don't fully use it. They might be using 20% of the capability. And actually, then when you ask the user base, turns out that 80% of them, they only need that 20%. They don't need the rest. And when we ask them, they would actually prefer that it's within Hostaway. So we are in no way planning to compete with our partners on the marketplace. Instead, we're trying to offer the basic functionality that some of them offer within our platform to those who, let's be honest, the majority, that's good enough. They would only be using 20%. But for those users who want to use the full selection of whatever our marketplace partners are offering, of course, they will always be able to use that.
I love that, and that's such a difference in the mindset compared to, I mean, there's some softwares out there now that still really keep your hands tied, but gosh, you go back 5, 10 years ago, and it's like everything was so locked down at that point, but I love that Hostaway embodies that and understands there's so many different ways to do this business. I mean, you can be 2 companies in the same market that operate completely different, and you go different market or different sides of the country, and it really could look like a totally different business inside. So to restrict what companies are able to access is not fair, and I think a lot of property managers now are cognizant of that because of either it's happened to them or they've heard it happen to their peers, that you don't want to be in something that's going to limit your ability to grow, and you don't want to have to overhaul your entire tech stack because there's something new that you want to try that you're not able to do. So that's really great.
Yeah, well, our industry is a derivative of the real estate industry, and in the real estate industry, there's one symbolism of it. It's a board game called Monopoly. Yeah, but when you look at the people, I mean, you got some of the richest people in the world, and even a former U.S. president. It's all based on real estate, and the mentality is that you gotta eventually own the whole thing. Like there's
Yeah.
no coexisting. But the thing is that a lot of the people in this space, they really have that mentality that they're gonna own the world. And I think
Mhm.
if you have that attitude, that's great as a vision. But if you actually go and tell people that you're gonna put them out of business, that's really not a good way to succeed. And that's why a lot of companies in our space have got a really bad reputation, I think, or they're not likable. And we've always been we try our best to be extremely humble because we know how hard it is to build a business from scratch. We got thousands of customers who have built a business from scratch, and we have nothing but respect for them. And I'll give a good example. A couple of years ago, our competitors started realizing how valuable the data in their system is, and they started selling it to third parties. What that actually means is if you're using a software to run your business, that same software company is taking your business secrets and selling it to your competition. That is absolutely insane. And
Wow.
when I found out about that we could make a lot of money, I instantly said, no, we're never going to do that because these are our
Yeah.
customers. Our job here is to protect them from the
Protect them,
harsh
yeah. Yeah,
reality
wow.
out there. But then
Yeah.
I found out that it's what everyone does, and we still don't do it. We still don't sell our data, our customers' data, without their knowledge to anyone because I think it would be unfair. But these are things that a lot of property managers don't even realize.
Well, Marcus, I think you have a great approach to the way you handle your customers, the way you handle the business. And what I love is that what you just said there is going to enable more creativity, collaboration, and advancement in our industry. And I think I'm all for consolidation where it makes sense, but consolidation to me is also what suffocates the creativity and all of the great technology that's been built because it starts to get into one, like singular thought process. So I applaud you and really enjoy the fact that you guys are open to be, part of the world, not controlling the world. That's a really great place to be. But I know that you are tight on time and we have to end this, but we want to have you back. And obviously, with Hostaway being one of our brand sponsors, we're super excited for that. Before we let you go, are there any parting words that you want to share with anybody?
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, I have to go to my next meeting, but it was really nice to have you here. There was something I wanted to say, but I'll save that for next time.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to see you again, Marcus. You are only the second guest in history to have been on the podcast 3 times.
Wow.
So, an esteemed group, and I think Annie said the last time it was Pete DeMeo has been on 3 times with Travel Boom. We're eventually gonna have a mug for you or some sort of prize, but until then
It's an honor.
well, thank you so much. You always share great insights, and I know our listeners are always excited to listen to your episodes. But until the next time that you make it for the true record, which would be 4 times on the show, what's a good way for our listeners to get in touch?
Oh, you can get in touch on hostaway.com. We got no matter what you want to talk to us about. We got a lot of people. We have almost 200 staff now in 40 countries. We're a fully remote organization. If you want to reach out to me personally, just Google for LinkedIn Marcus Hostaway. The first result there, that's me.
Perfect. And if anybody wants to get in touch with Annie and I, you can go to alexandanniepodcast.com. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.